In today's video, we're going to try to recreate an aquascape that I did 4 years ago and see if we can make it better. So make sure you watch it all the way to the end and let me know in the comments which one is your favorite. This one or the one from 4 years ago. Let's get started. So the tank that we're going to be using today is a little bit different from the one that I used 4 years ago. Today we're using a UNS 45T. Let's check out the dimensions. From left to right, it's 45 centimeters or it's like 17.5 inch. Front to back, we have more or less 28 centimeters or 11 inches. And the height is 36 centimeters and that is 14 inches. So the total volume is roughly 42 liters or 11 gallons and quite interesting dimensions. Normally for aquascaping I would like a little bit more depth, a little bit less height, but I'm up for a little challenge. Then for the light I'm using the CHIHIROS WRGB Pro 2. Really powerful light. You can change the colors, you can make schedules, sunrise, sunset, all that good stuff. Now this tank is actually going to replace the one behind it. So that one will be taken down. But I'll keep the filter, keep the CO2 system and just attach that again to this new scape. So basically this one will be cycled immediately. Okay, let's get to work. First thing I want to do is add a background, and as always I'm using this self-adhesive glass window film. You can find this in your local hardware store or on Amazon, and I'll leave some links in the video description. Actually, I'll leave links to anything that I'm using for this build in the video description. Okay, background is done, so now we can begin with the layout. So let's talk about how we're going to replicate the tank that I made 4 years ago. The layout was quite special because it had these large black lava rocks that were completely covered in Fissidens moss. Now I achieved that result with a so-called moss DRYSTART. So for that layout I just took a little bit of Fissidens moss, I put it in a blender with a little bit of water and I think some AQUASOIL as well, and I just painted that mixture all over the lava rocks, and then I covered it with cling film, let it DRYSTART for about a month or so, and then I scaped the tank. And that's exactly what I've prepared for this layout. So I actually started on this project already a month ago. I made a layout sort of similar with the lava rocks, and then I again made a moss smoothie or a moss paste. This time I've used Ricardia moss, I've used something called tortoise moss, and I've used Booster Vlaanderen moss. So 3 different types. Added them all in a little cup, added some water, blitzed it up, and I again painted the rocks with this moss smoothie. Covered it with cling film, and then I just let it be for about a month. I think it's been a month, yeah. Occasionally I would spray it with some water or a little bit of APT dew, which is kind of like a nutrient spray. And right now, some of the rocks are looking nicely covered with moss. Of course, it still has a long way to go, but it will grow faster once we submerge these rocks underwater. So the hardscape is sort of already done. So let's add in the substrate, then we can put the rocks back in, plant it, and then we just have to let it grow in. Okay, so first part of the substrate is going to be some crushed lava rock. Since this column is only 28 centimeters front to back, I want to build up quite some height just to help increase that sense of depth, you know. Now crushed lava rock doesn't really contain a whole lot of nutrients, so the next thing I'm going to add is the substrate from Danula plants. This is just a very nutrient rich base layer. So I'm going to sprinkle this on top of the crushed lava rock, and hopefully over time it will kind of sink down through all the little gaps and provide some nutrients for the roots. Okay, we have the crushed lava rock, we have the substrate. Next up I'm going to add some Danula plants power caps. These are basically just root tabs or nutrient capsules. I'm going to open them up, sprinkle them all over the substrate just to provide a little bit more nutrients for the plants. Okay, next up I'm going to add the ADA substrate additives. So that means we're already up to 6 different items just for the substrate alone. And we're not even done yet. We're also going to add in AQUASOIL. So I'm sure some of you that are watching are thinking like, isn't that a little bit much just for the substrate? And to be honest with you, it is a lot. And none of this is really necessary. You can get really good results by just using substrate and covering that with some gravel or just using AQUASOIL. The only reason I'm using all these different products is because I want to really I want an active substrate immediately. I want to have a lot of nutrients in the substrate just so I can boost the plant growth and show you guys an end result within 4 to 6 weeks. So I'm starting the video right now, but I'll show you the end result at the end of this video. And I want to make sure that that process goes very smoothly and yeah, just without any issues, you know. So that's why I'm adding all these different products. You can do the same if you want to, but you don't have to. So we're done with the substrate for now. I'll probably add in some more AQUASOIL later, but I first want to move on to the rocks. We now have a good cushion for the rocks to sit on, and we've also kind of already increased the height a little bit. If you would just put the rocks on the bottom glass, then the rocks would only come up till here, and the top part of the tank would just be empty, you know. We could fill it in with plants, of course, but it's nice to have the rocks a little bit more elevated. So let's see if we can kind of recreate the hardscape from the tank that I made 4 years ago. Okay, quite happy with the positioning of those 2 big rocks. I just want to make sure that they're not the same height. So this one is now a little bit taller, this one is a little bit lower. I think right now it looks good. Next up I want to add in a little bit more AQUASOIL. Okay guys, I think that's the hardscape done. I'm quite happy with it. We have a nice little valley in the middle, a nice slope in the edges. Yeah, it's looking good. I was thinking of adding a little bit more lava rocks, but I want to use as much space as possible for the plants. I have a lot of plants to go in here, so yeah, let's give everything a quick spray because I think the moss is starting to dry out. Okay guys, let's see what kind of plants we got. As always, the plants are sponsored by Denlo Plants. Big shout out to them. I have mostly tissue culture, including a new one, the Rotala rotonifolia bloodwet. Beautiful plant. Of course, that one's going to go in the background. For the foreground, I have Glossostigma. I haven't used this plant in a while. With the tank that I made 4 years ago, I made a mistake of using dwarf hairgrass in the foreground. And dwarf hairgrass in combination with the Viscidens moss, it's a bit of a nightmare because you always have tiny pieces of moss falling into the foreground. And then it's going to start growing from there. And before you know it, you have a moss foreground instead of a hairgrass foreground. So yeah, we also have some Ricardia. This is just for places where the DRYSTART didn't really work, so just a few patches of Ricardia here and there. I have a floating plant, the Salvinia minima. Always like to use floating plants in the new setup, just to help with soaking up those excess nutrients. And I think that's it. I have a few more Busta Flandra as well, which I don't have right here, but we're going to add some boost on the rocks as well. Okay, we're ready for my favorite part of this process. Adding in the plants, everything is nicely portioned so I can move quickly. So I'll start with the Glossostigma. I'm going to put it in the foreground, but also a little bit in the middle, in between the 2 rocks. Yeah, let's just start planting and I can talk you through my thought process while we're adding in the plants. Here we go. Glossostigma in the foreground. I don't use this plant very often, and the reason for that is it's not a very low maintenance carpeting plant. So it grows quite quickly, and that's a good thing of course. But in order to make sure it looks like a good and a nice carpet, you have to trim it quite often. For example, a dwarf hairgrass carpet, you can get away with trimming it once in 6 months or something. But Glossostigma, you have to trim it, I think, at least once a month. Then as a transition from the Glosso towards the background, I want some hairgrass. So at some point this will start mixing with the Glosso and it will look really natural. So that's the first 2 plants done, the Glossostigma and the hairgrass. Now we can move on to the background. And once the background is done, we will add some moss and some epiphytes into these dark patches underneath the rocks. Okay, so first up the Rotala bloodwet. Doesn't really look like much for now because it came from a tissue culture cup. Yeah, this is going to be a beautiful reddish, purplish Rotala. Then in between that, I'm also going to plant some Juncus repens. This will look really natural in between the red stems. So I've planted the Juncus repens and the Rotala blood red on both sides in the background. But actually I have one more background plant. This is the Rotala rotunifolia. This one has been grown immersed, so it's very big, very tall. So if I would plant this as it is right now, it will probably cause too much shade for the blood red, and the blood red will not really grow very well. So what I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to cut off all of that and just plant this little bit of the roots and just a little bit of the stem. And in this way, the blood red and the rotunifolia will both get enough light to grow. So the main reason for adding in this rotunifolia as well is just to add a little bit more color variety, you know. If it was just the blood red, of course it would look very nice, but it would be very red. With the rotunifolia mixed in there, we'll have a little bit more of a natural color variety, in my opinion. And don't get me wrong, the stems that I just cut off, you can still use them, you can still plant them in the background. I'm just not going to do that because I already have enough plant material in the background, but if I would have more space, I would add this in as well. But that's the background done, so we can now move on to the rocks. For that I have the Riccardia moss, I have some really nice Bucephalandra Serum Brown, and I think I have a few other boosts as well. So unfortunately the moss DRYSTART didn't work everywhere, so in those spots we're just going to use some patches of Riccardia moss. And same thing with the Bucephalandra, just a little bit of super glue attached to the rhizome. And just stick it anywhere, but I'm sure we've all seen this before, right? Okay guys, planting is done. Looks pretty good already, but a freshly planted tank always looks a little bit so and so. The next step is to move the tank into its new position, install the filter, install the CO2, fill up with water. And then as always, at the end of the video, you guys are going to see how this tank looks in about 4 to 6 weeks from now. It has been exactly 68 days since I began the moss DRYSTART and 37 days since filling up the tank with water. And right now, it is looking really good. I'm saying right now because it hasn't been entirely smooth sailing. After 10 days, the tank looked like this. Not exactly the look I was going for. Unfortunately, a lot of the Bucephalandra melted as well, so from now on I'm only going to add these plants once the tank is cycled and stable. With a little bit of care and attention, I managed to get the tank back on track, and a week later I decided to introduce the fish, a nice group of CHIHIROS boras. Besides the CHIHIROS boras, I've also added some cherry shrimp, Clithon snails and a pair of scarlet batis. Now let's talk about the moss. I really love how the lava rocks have developed, especially the one on the right. For the DRYSTART I use Riccardia, Boost moss and tortoise moss, and I think the tortoise worked the best. That's the moss that's growing downwards. The stems and the carpet have been trimmed twice in the past 5 weeks, and soon I'm gonna have to do it again. It only takes about 30 minutes, so it's not too bad. Now there's only one thing left to do. Now let me know in the comments which one is your favorite. This one or the one from 4 years ago. So I think this new layout ended up looking a bit different, which is totally fine. I didn't want to make a one-on-one copy. But I do think that the overall composition of the previous layout was better. But yeah, I'm curious what you guys think. I'm going to end the video with some cinematic shots. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.